fry week. I can't believe it is already week 4. We've got our hair tied back, you know the drill, our hands are washed and our aprons are on. So let's get cooking so that we can plate up. It's time for week 4 of the Twinkl Homemade Plate Up. So the first thing to say about this week is you can get your creative hats on. We are going to make a stir fry, but actually you can pick and choose which vegetables you would like to use. Now, the recipe in the pack says that you are going to need 2 red peppers, 4 spring onions, 200 grams of broccoli cut into small pieces. Then you're going to need 200 grams of sugar snap peas and 200 grams of bean sprouts. And then you are going to need your garlic cloves, your chilli and your ginger. And then what you can do is you can get some ready to wok noodles or rice, or you could cook these ahead of time so that they are ready to go. And then the only final thing that you are going to need, lots of ingredients, is you are going to make your sauce. Now, as with all weeks, I tend to get a little bit prepped up because, and this is so important with stir fry, you need everything to hand and everything to ready, because stir fry you cook hot, but you cook quick. So you cannot start cooking some peppers and then think, oh, well, I best now chop my broccoli, because it just doesn't work. You have to get everything prepped. So I already have my stir fry sauce that I have homemade and all ready to go. So in order to make this, you're going to need 4 tablespoons of soy sauce and 4 tablespoons of mirin, which is kind of like a Chinese rice wine. You can use Chinese rice wine if you have that. That sometimes is how it is labelled up. You could, if you have in the cupboard, use some dry sherry. If you want to keep that out entirely, then that is entirely up to you. You could just add some more soy sauce. Then you need 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce, 2 teaspoons of tomato ketchup. You can also use a teaspoon of sugar to sweeten it up, that kind of sweet and savoury taste. I have also in mine added some Chinese 5 spice, because that is a really lovely oriental type spice mix. I think that it adds that really delicious oriental flavour and it smells delicious. But again, play with the herbs and spices, use whatever you would like in order to make your stupendous stir fry. So let's get cooking. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to chop all of our vegetables, because as I've said, stir fry, you cook it quick and hot. So we're going to get all of that prepared. If you are going to level up today, I am going to show you how you can use filo pastry. It's a great and versatile product to use, but it needs some careful care, because it can dry out rather quickly because there isn't really much fat in it. So I'm going to show you how to level up and use filo pastry if you are going to be making spring rolls. If you are, I recommend at this point that you chop not only the vegetables for your stir fry, but that you chop also the vegetables ready for your spring rolls. So the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to chop and prepare our spring onions. So I'm going to get them out of their little elastic band home, and that's the first thing that I'm going to prepare. Now, remembering our chopping skills from the beginning of this challenge, you are going to keep your fingers tucked under and well out the way, using your knuckle as a guide. Now, I'm going to chop my spring onions nice and finely. Now, with spring onions, it's always worth taking the first layer off. I give them all a great wash before we start, but also I find that the top layer can often be a little bit dry and a little bit firm. And then I also not only cut the bottoms off, but I cut the tops off, because again, that is a little bit dry. So I've chopped my onions. Now I'm going to chop my peppers. And now I'm going to chop up some broccoli. So I'm going to carefully just take off some little florets off of the broccoli, making sure that I'm cutting away from me, that I'm not anywhere near my body, and I'm practicing really safe knife skills. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that all the pieces are roughly the same size so that they cook evenly. Finally, I'm going to give my monge a nice wash. The bean sprouts come washed and ready to use, so I don't need to worry about those. So the only other thing I need to do is I need to just get my garlic and my chilli and my ginger prepared. So all of my vegetables are ready. We're ready to start cooking. Obviously, if you're going to make a meat version with some chicken or some beef strips or anything else that you like, then you would get that prepared as well. But now all our vegetables are ready, so let's start cooking. Before you add your oil is you're going to need something with a high smoking point, because we're going to be cooking on a really hot heat. So groundnut oil, for example, is perfect. Don't use olive oil, you'll find a little burn and it'll make your food taste really not very nice. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put our stove on to a really high heat, and then we're just going to leave this pan to get smoking hot. Now, it's really important for me to say to you that you need to get a grown-up, making sure that a grown-up is nearby or is supporting and helping you, because pans get very hot, and as we know, pans can burn. Now, I can see that my oil is now really hot, and the first thing that I am going to do is I'm going to add in my onions first. So only my onions. Hear the sizzle, so we know that it's nice and hot. And we're just going, because the onions take a tiny bit more time to cook than other things, we're just going to put them on for a couple of minutes, just so that they can start to get cooking. So our onions have had a couple of minutes to cook. Now what we're going to do is we are going to add in all of our other vegetables. Whoops! Escaped a bit of broccoli. And we're going to give it another fry. And I'm going to pop some bean sprouts in too, which are my favourite. Now, I know that the recipe has particular measurements of various things. Feel free just to throw it all in, because what you'll find is that you can see by eye whether you have enough of the perfect vegetables. Now, if you were going to cook with meat, I would have added my meat just after the spring onions, and I would have allowed it to cook until it was almost cooked through before I then added in my vegetables. The secret with stir fry is to make sure that you don't overcook it. So you want your vegetables to be what's known as al dente, which means sort of firm to bite. You don't want to be cooking these so that they're super soft, because actually you're going to lose all of the freshness and the goodness. So it's always best to err on the side of al dente rather than overly cooked. So my vegetables are starting to soften. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add my chilli and my garlic and my ginger in. Now you don't want to add these too early, because if they catch, they can end up tasting a little bit bitter. So we're going to give that a lovely mix in, and that's when you're going to start to really smell some really delicious flavours. Oh, it smells yummy. And then what we're going to do finally is we are going to take our noodles or our rice or whatever it is that you want to use, and we're going to add that to the pan. Now, if you want to pre-cook some rice or some noodles ahead of time, then do so. Alternatively, as I said, you can just use ones that you've got pre-cooked. Now what you need to do is just keep stir frying for another minute or two so that those noodles are nice and cooked and warmed through. And then finally what we're going to do is we are going to add our sauce. And it's as simple as that. Again, just another minute or two, just to warm the sauce through. And we're done. Now that is a really quick, fairly low cost, delicious midweek meal that's ready in minutes, quicker than you can order a takeaway. We're now ready to plate up and I can't wait to taste it because it smells absolutely delicious. So I've plated up my Stupendous stir fry. It smells divine. I can't wait to tuck in. Don't forget to head over to Facebook and share your Stupendous stir fries and what you've got up to cooking this week in order to be in with a chance of winning one of our top chef pin badges. As always, you can download the menus and the place settings if you want to make a really big family meal deal over Stupendous Stir Fry Week. And now I'm going to take you through how to use more Chinese style vegetables in order to make your own delicious spring rolls by using filo pastry. So let's get going. So today's level up skill is how to use filo pastry. Now filo pastry comes ready-made in a packet and it is really fine rolls of pastry. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to take it out of your packet and lay it out onto a board, and this is where I come in with some really important tips. You need to get yourself a tea towel which you have dampened under the tap, so not so it's really soaking wet. This is just slightly damp, and then you need to lay it over your filo pastry, because what you will find is that your filo pastry will dry out really quickly because it doesn't really contain much fat. So whenever you use filo pastry, take it out of the packet and put it on your baking tray or your board or your table or whatever you're using, and immediately you get it covered. And then for each sheet that you take, you open your cover, you take your sheet, and then you immediately, don't forget to cover it up again, put it back to sleep under its damp blanket. And that really is the most important level up skill. Sounds really simple, but you wouldn't believe how often you can forget to put the damp cloth on, then you're trying to work with the filo pastry, it's all breaking up and going hideously wrong. Really important level up skill is to make sure that it's always covered with a damp towel. Now what I'm going to do is show you how to actually work with it. So as I have mentioned, filo pastry doesn't really contain fat. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our first strip of filo pastry and we're going to lay it carefully down on the table. Now, as I've just said, it doesn't contain any real fat, and so therefore what you have to do when you use filo pastry, another level up skill, is you need to make sure that you're carefully always covering it in a fine layer of oil or butter that you have melted. Now, the most obvious choice is to get a pastry brush and brush it with oil or melted butter. However, I find in my house that pastry brushes are a complete no-no because my children flick the pastry brushes, I get oil up my walls, it all becomes a total nightmare, not necessarily on purpose, but what we do is as follows. I get a coffee filter, you could use some thick kitchen towel if you wish, and I wrap it around my finger to make a little kind of cover, and then I dip that into my olive oil and I use that to dab and wipe around and over my filo pastry. It works just as well as a brush, but what I don't get is flicks of oil. So I'm going to show you how to work with the filo pastry. We're going to take one bit of pastry, we're going to get our little spreader. I'm going to just spread it with I've got olive oil, but you can use melted butter. And then I always get a second sheet because I find if you don't, I've laid the opposite way, but I find that actually if you don't, you're going to find that your spring rolls probably are going to split a little bit as you go to roll them. So what I'm going to do is I've got my olive oil, and I've spread that all in. Now I'm going to get my filling, and I'm just going to put a small amount of filling on the end, like so. And then what I am going to do is I'm going to roll this way first, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll in and in this way. And I'm going to swivel it round, and then it's like kind of rolling it up into bed. I'm going to roll. Now if you start to see a few little cracks, really don't worry, because what you find is that it's a bit dry at this point because you haven't got your olive oil. Then at the end, what you're going to do is you're going to put some olive oil on the end so that you can seal it and do one last roll. And then you're going to take your spreader and you're going to spread all of the spring roll in the olive oil. And this is really important because again, otherwise your spring roll will taste super dry and not very nice. And then pop it on a baking tray and pop it in the oven. Thank you so much for joining me for Stupendous Stir Fry Week. My spring rolls are now out of the oven. I've eaten my stir fry. I'm now going to tuck into these. I can't wait to see what you guys get up to, and I will see you next week. Top 5 Top Chef pad. I've plated up my stir fry. It's probably cold now because it's taken me 20 takes to do this. So hopefully it does taste all right, who knows. And join me next week because next week is, I don't know.